The first transmission came through on a Tuesday morning, crackling through the static of deep space like a whisper from the void itself. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen was half asleep at his station aboard the UES Stalwart when the words cut through the background noise of the universe and made him sit straight up in his chair. "This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming." Marcus blinked at his console, certain he had imagined it. The Stalwart was bleeding atmosphere from 3 different hull breaches. Their engines were dead. The Kreth warfleet that had ambushed them near the Kepler transit point was circling back for the killing blow, and Earth Command had already written them off as acceptable losses. There was no help coming. Everyone on the bridge knew it. Did anyone else hear that? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Elena Vasquez turned from where she had been studying the tactical display, her face drawn with the exhaustion of 36 hours without sleep and the weight of knowing she was about to lose her entire crew. "Hear what?" Before Marcus could answer, the transmission repeated. This time it was louder, clearer, and everyone on the bridge heard it. "This is Phantom. I repeat, hold your position. Do not engage. Help is coming." The voice was female, calm and steady despite the chaos of the situation. There was something about it that made Marcus want to believe, even though everything he knew about their tactical situation told him belief was foolish. Captain Vasquez moved to the communications station. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Stalwart. Identify yourself. What is your position?" There was a long pause. Then, the voice came back, and Marcus could have sworn he heard a hint of amusement in it. "My position is classified, Captain. As is my identity. What I can tell you is that in approximately 4 minutes, you're going to see something that will seem impossible. When it happens, I need you to get your people ready to move. Can you do that?" Vasquez exchanged glances with her bridge crew. They were all thinking the same thing. This had to be some kind of trick. The Kreth were known for their psychological warfare tactics. But something in the woman's voice, something in the absolute certainty of her words, made the captain hesitate. "What exactly are we going to see?" Vasquez asked. "Victory," the voice replied. "Now get ready." The transmission cut off. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the distant groaning of stressed hull plates and the soft beeping of damage alerts. Then, Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, the sensor operator, gasped. "Captain, I'm reading something on long-range sensors. I don't know what it is. It's moving too fast to be a ship. It's almost like..." She never finished her sentence. On the main view screen, something appeared in the middle of the Kreth formation. It was a ship, but unlike any ship Marcus had ever seen. It was small, barely larger than a heavy fighter, painted in matte black with no visible markings. It seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And it was moving in ways that should have been physically impossible. The Kreth warships opened fire immediately, their plasma batteries filling space with streams of superheated death. But the black ship danced between the bolts like they were standing still. It rolled and spun and twisted, threading through kill zones that would have vaporized any other craft, and, as it moved, it struck back. From the nose of the black ship came lances of brilliant white light. Each one hit a Kreth vessel exactly where it would do the most damage. Power cores ruptured. Weapons systems exploded. Bridge towers were carved clean off their supports. In less than 2 minutes, 3 Kreth destroyers were dead in space, and the black ship hadn't even been scratched. "What the hell is that thing?" someone whispered. Marcus watched in stunned silence as the black ship engaged the Kreth flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Throat of Heaven that had been responsible for the deaths of over 2 million humans in the past year alone. The dreadnought tried to run, its massive engines flaring as it attempted to reach safe distance for a jump, but the black ship was faster. It came up alongside the dreadnought like a predator stalking wounded prey. Then, in a move that defied every law of physics Marcus had ever learned, it seemed to phase right through the dreadnought's shields. One moment it was outside. The next moment it was inside, nestled against the dreadnought's hull like it had always been there. A series of explosions rippled along the dreadnought's length. They weren't random. They were surgical. Each one took out a critical system: weapons, engines, life support, communications. In 30 seconds, the mightiest warship in the Kreth fleet was reduced to a drifting hulk. The surviving Kreth ships tried to flee. The black ship let them go. Then, it turned and moved toward the stalwart, and, for a brief moment, Marcus felt his heart stop. What if this wasn't a rescue? What if this was something worse? But, as the black ship approached, the transmission crackled back to life. Stalwart, this is Phantom. The area is secure. I'm transmitting coordinates to a safe harbor where you can make repairs. You should have enough engine power left to make it at quarter speed. Captain Vasquez found her voice. Phantom, I don't know who you are, but you just saved my entire crew. On behalf of the United Earth Navy, you don't need to do anything except survive, Captain. That's all any of us can do. Get your people home. Tell them there's someone out here fighting for them. And, if anyone asks who saved you today. The black ship began to fade, its form becoming less solid, less real, until it was little more than a shadow against the stars. Tell them it was Phantom. Then, it was gone, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but debris and the fading echoes of its transmission. The stalwart limped home 3 weeks later. Captain Vasquez filed her report with High Command, describing in detail what she had witnessed. The admirals listened politely, asked a few questions, and, then, classified the entire incident at the highest possible level. But, stories have a way of spreading, especially stories about hope. Within a month, whispers of Phantom were circulating through every fleet in the United Earth Navy. Some said it was a secret experimental ship. Others claimed it was an alien ally who had chosen to side with humanity. A few believed it was a ghost, the spirit of some long-dead hero returned to fight one last war. The truth, as is often the case, was far stranger and far more human than any of the rumors. Her name had been Sarah. Just Sarah. No last name, no family, no history that anyone could trace. She had appeared at a recruitment center on Luna Colony in the 3rd year of the Kreth War, a slight woman with dark eyes and a haunted expression who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. The recruiter had been skeptical. The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s, too old for combat training by normal standards, and there was something about her that seemed off. Not dangerous exactly, but unsettling. Like she knew things she shouldn't know. Like she had seen things no one should see. Any prior military experience, the recruiter had asked, going through the standard questions. Yes, the woman had replied. What branch? What unit? The woman had smiled then, a sad little smile that made her look decades older than her face suggested. That information doesn't exist yet. The recruiter had almost thrown her out right then. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like a soldier even though she wasn't wearing a uniform. Maybe it was just a feeling, a sense that this woman was exactly what they needed even if he couldn't explain why. He had sent her to the testing center. Standard procedure. Physical fitness evaluation, psychological screening, aptitude tests. The results came back within hours, and, when the recruiter read them, he spilled his coffee all over his desk. The woman had scored perfect marks on every single test. Not just high marks. Perfect marks. No one had ever done that in the entire history of the testing program. Her reflexes were off the charts. Her spatial awareness was beyond anything the psychologists had ever measured. And her performance on the combat simulations. She had cleared every scenario in record time, using tactics that the simulation designers hadn't even thought of. In one case, she had exploited a glitch in the simulation code that no one knew existed, using it to disable an enemy fleet before they could fire a single shot. When the testing commander asked her how she had known about the glitch, she had simply shrugged and said, "Experience." They should have studied her. They should have asked more questions, demanded more answers, tried to understand where she had come from and how she knew the things she knew. But the war was going badly. Earth was losing a planet a month to the Kreth advance. And here was a woman who could apparently do the impossible. They gave her a ship. Not a normal ship, of course. A prototype, an experimental craft that had killed 2 test pilots already and was scheduled to be scrapped because no one could figure out how to fly it. She took one look at the black-hulled monster in the hangar bay and smiled that sad smile again. "Hello, old friend," she had whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "It's been a long time." She named the ship Echoes of Tomorrow, though she never explained why. The technicians who prepared it for launch said she spent hours alone in the cockpit before her first flight, talking to the ship like it was alive, like it was an old companion she was reuniting with after a long separation. Her first combat mission was supposed to be a simple escort run. A convoy of refugee ships was making the jump from Proxima to Seoul, and they needed protection. There were supposed to be 3 cruisers providing cover, but 2 of them had been ambushed and destroyed the day before, leaving only the Echoes of Tomorrow and a single destroyer called the Vigilant. The Kreth hit them halfway through the transit. 12 attack ships, more than enough to slaughter the convoy and its pitiful escort. The captain of the Vigilant was already preparing to order the refugees to scatter when the woman's voice came over the comms. "Vigilant, this is Echoes. Stay with the convoy. Don't let them separate. I'll handle this." The captain had sputtered something about chain of command and proper protocols, but the woman wasn't listening. She had already engaged the enemy. What happened over the next 11 minutes would become the stuff of legend. The Echoes of Tomorrow moved through the Kreth formation like death itself, destroying ship after ship with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. The woman flew like she could see the future, anticipating every Kreth maneuver before they made it, positioning herself exactly where she needed to be to deliver killing blows. When it was over, all 12 Kreth attack ships were debris. The Echoes of Tomorrow was untouched. And the convoy made it safely to Seoul, carrying 30,000 refugees who would have died without her intervention. The captain of the Vigilant filed a report. So did every other officer who witnessed the battle. High Command reviewed the footage, analyzed the tactical data, and came to a conclusion that should have been impossible. The woman hadn't just outflown the Kreth pilots. She had outthought them. She had known what they were going to do before they did it. Every move she made was a response to a threat that didn't exist yet, a counter to an attack that was still being planned. It was as if she could see the future. They called her in for questioning. The admirals wanted to know her secret. Was it some kind of implant? A new type of neural enhancement? Advanced precognitive technology that no one had heard of? The woman sat in the interview room, hands folded on the table in front of her, and said nothing for a long time. The admirals repeated their questions. They demanded answers. They threatened her with court-martial, with imprisonment, with worse. Finally, she spoke. "You want to know how I do what I do. I understand. In your position, I would want to know the same thing. But I can't tell you, because if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And even if you did believe me, the knowledge would change things in ways that I can't allow." Admiral Chen, the oldest and most senior of the assembled officers, leaned forward. "Young lady, you just single-handedly destroyed 12 enemy warships using tactics that our best analysts can't explain. You're flying a ship that killed every other pilot who tried to fly it. And you expect us to just accept that you have secrets you can't share?" The woman met his gaze. There was something ancient in her eyes, something that made Admiral Chen suddenly feel very young despite his 73 years. "I don't expect you to accept anything, Admiral. I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to believe that I am fighting for humanity, that I will continue to fight for humanity until my last breath, and that the best thing you can do is let me keep fighting." She stood up, and none of the admirals moved to stop her. "Every day I'm out there, I save lives. Human lives. Your sons and daughters, your husbands and wives, your parents and grandchildren. Every Kreth ship I destroy is a ship that won't kill more of our people. Isn't that enough? Does it really matter how I do it?" She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "I've been called a lot of things in my time, Admiral. But the one that matters, the one I've earned, is Phantom. And ghosts don't answer questions. They just fight. And then they disappear. She left. The admirals argued for hours about what to do with her. Some wanted her arrested and studied. Others wanted her promoted and given command of an entire fleet. In the end, they reached a compromise that satisfied no one. They let her keep flying. The war continued. The Kreth pushed deeper into human space, and humanity pushed back. Battles were won and lost. Heroes were made and forgotten. And, through it all, the Phantom fought. She appeared in the darkest moments, when hope seemed lost and victory seemed impossible. She materialized out of nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before anyone could get a clear look at her. Crews who were seconds from death found themselves saved by a black ship that moved like no ship should move. Planets that were hours from orbital bombardment watched in amazement as Kreth fleets were torn apart by a single impossible vessel. And, always, there was the same transmission. This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming. Soldiers who heard that voice said it gave them strength. It reminded them that they weren't alone, that someone was out there fighting for them, that no matter how dark things got, hope still existed. The Kreth came to fear her. They called her the Death Shadow, the Black Wraith, the Human Ghost. Kreth commanders who encountered her rarely survived to describe the experience, but those who did spoke of a terror beyond anything they had ever known. She didn't just destroy ships. She destroyed morale. Entire Kreth fleets were known to retreat at the mere rumor of her presence. But she was only one person, flying one ship, and the war was vast beyond comprehension. She couldn't be everywhere at once. She couldn't save everyone. And every life she failed to save, every ship she was too late to rescue, every planet she couldn't protect, they weighed on her. The technicians who maintained the echoes of tomorrow noticed things. They noticed that the Phantom never seemed to sleep. They noticed that she often sat alone in her cockpit for hours after returning from missions, staring at nothing. They noticed the way her hands sometimes shook when she thought no one was watching. One young technician, a girl named Maya who reminded the Phantom of someone she had lost long ago, finally worked up the courage to ask her about it. "Are you okay?" Maya asked, finding the Phantom in the hangar bay at 3 a.m, sitting on a cargo crate and staring at the stars through the hangar's transparent ceiling. "You seem sad." The Phantom was quiet for a long time. Then, she patted the crate next to her, and Maya sat down. "Do you know what it's like to remember things that haven't happened yet?" the Phantom asked. Maya shook her head. "It's like living your life in reverse. You know how things end before they begin. You know who's going to die before they're even born. And, no matter how hard you try to change things, no matter how many battles you win or how many lives you save, you can never quite shake the feeling that it's already over. That everything you do has already been done. That you're just playing out a part in a story that was written long before you were born." Maya didn't understand. How could she? She was 19 years old, brilliant with machines but still so young, still so full of hope. She hadn't yet learned how heavy hope could become when you carried it long enough. "I lost someone," the Phantom continued. "A long time ago. Or maybe it wasn't that long ago. Time gets confusing when you've lived the way I've lived. But I lost her, and I've spent every moment since then trying to make sure her sacrifice meant something. Trying to save as many people as I can. Trying to build a future worth living in." She looked at Maya, and there were tears in her eyes. "Some days I think I'm making a difference. Some days I think everything I do matters. But other days I just feel so tired. So alone. I look at all the stars out there, all the billions of lives counting on people like me to protect them, and I wonder if any of it is worth it. If anything can ever truly be saved." Maya didn't know what to say. So she did the only thing she could think of. She put her arm around the Phantom's shoulders and held her, the way her mother used to hold her when she was scared. "I don't know who you really are," Maya said quietly. "I don't know where you came from or what you've been through. But I know that you saved my brother's life 3 months ago. He was on the stalwart. He was sure he was going to die. And then, you came, and you saved him, and now he's home with his kids and his wife, and he's alive because of you. The Phantom didn't say anything, but some of the tension left her shoulders. Maybe you can't save everyone, Maya continued. Maybe the war is too big and there are too many enemies and not enough time. But you saved my brother. You saved his family. And that matters. That matters more than anything. They sat together in silence for a long time after that, two women from different worlds finding comfort in each other's presence. Eventually the Phantom thanked Maya and went back to her ship, and Maya went back to her quarters, and neither of them spoke of that conversation again. But something changed after that night. The Phantom still fought with the same deadly precision, still appeared out of nowhere to save the desperate and the doomed, still vanished before anyone could ask too many questions. But there was something lighter about her now, something that might almost have been peace. She had been reminded why she fought. Not for victory. Not for glory. Not even for the future she was trying to protect. She fought for the brothers who went home to their families. For the children who got to grow up because someone was watching over them. For all the small, precious moments of human connection that made life worth living. The war would end someday. The Kreth would be defeated, or they wouldn't. History would remember the great battles and the mighty heroes, or it would forget them entirely. But the Phantom would keep fighting. Because that was what she did. That was who she was. And, somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, aboard ships that were running out of hope, soldiers would hear a familiar voice crackling through their comms. This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming. And they would believe it. The Battle of Kepler 442 was supposed to be the end of everything. 3 years into the war, the Kreth had finally gathered enough forces for a full assault on the Sol system. Their combined fleet numbered over 2,000 warships, enough firepower to reduce Earth to a cinder and wipe humanity from the galaxy forever. The United Earth Navy had managed to assemble a defense force of 300 ships, brave captains and crews who knew they were going to their deaths but refused to let their homeworld fall without a fight. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the UES Resolution, flagship of the Home Defense Fleet, and watched the enemy armada emerge from hyperspace on the far side of the system. The tactical display was a sea of red, so many enemy contacts that the computer was having trouble tracking them all. Her own forces were a thin blue line, spread across the approaches to Earth like a fence made of paper. All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo, she said into her command channel. I'm not going to lie to you. The odds are against us. The numbers don't favor our survival. By every military calculation, we should have already surrendered. She paused, and, across the fleet, thousands of men and women held their breath. But we're not going to surrender. We're not going to run. We're not going to beg for mercy from creatures who don't know the meaning of the word. We are the last line of defense between those monsters and our families, our homes, everything we've ever loved. And if they want to take that from us, they're going to have to pay for every inch in blood. Across the fleet, weapons charged and shields activated and targeting systems locked onto the incoming enemy. 300 ships against 2,000. It wasn't a battle. It was a last stand. A final act of defiance from a species that refused to go quietly into extinction. All ships, Admiral Okonkwo said, her voice steady despite the fear that clawed at her heart, engaged the enemy. The two fleets closed on each other, and the space between them erupted into fire. The first hour was chaos. Human ships launched everything they had at the Kreth advance, and Kreth ships returned fire with terrible efficiency. Destroyers vanished in balls of flame. Cruisers broke apart under sustained bombardment. The vacuum of space filled with debris and bodies and the expanding plasma clouds of dying reactors. Admiral Okonkwo directed her fleet with everything she had learned in 30 years of military service, but it wasn't enough. The Kreth were too many. Every ship she destroyed was replaced by 3 more. Every tactical advantage she gained was countered by overwhelming force. By the end of the first hour, she had lost 40 ships. By the end of the second hour, she had lost 80 more. The Resolution was taking fire from multiple directions. Her shields were failing. Her hull was breached in a dozen places. Engineers were dying trying to keep critical systems online, and medical bays were overflowing with wounded who might never see home again. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, his voice barely audible over the alarms, "we're detecting a massive energy buildup in the Kreth flagship. It looks like they're preparing to fire their main weapon." Admiral Okonkwo knew what that meant. The Kreth flagship, a massive vessel called the Silence of Worlds, carried a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever developed. It was called the God Killer by those who had seen it in action. A single shot could crack a planet in half. Against a ship, even a ship as large as the Resolution, it would leave nothing but atoms. How long until they fire? 3 minutes, maybe less. 3 minutes. That was all the time she had left. 3 minutes to live, to fight, to somehow find a way to save her crew and her world. "Get me a channel to the fleet," she said. "I want to address everyone." The channel opened, and she took a deep breath. "All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. The enemy flagship is preparing to fire their main weapon. When they do, the Resolution will be destroyed. I am ordering all vessels to fall back to secondary defensive positions around Earth. Do not attempt to rescue us. Do not." Her words were cut off by a burst of static. Then, impossibly, a familiar voice filled the command channel. "This is Phantom. Cancel that order, Admiral. Your people aren't going anywhere." Every eye on every bridge in the fleet turned to their sensors. There was nothing there. No ships, no anomalies, nothing but empty space and distant stars. But the voice was unmistakable. "Phantom, this is Admiral Okonkwo. I don't know where you are or how you're broadcasting on this channel, but we don't have time for games. The enemy is about to destroy my flagship." "I know," the Phantom replied. "I've been watching. You've done well, Admiral. Better than I expected. Your crews have fought with honor and courage, and history will remember what they did today. But the battle isn't over yet." On the bridge of the Resolution, one of the sensor operators suddenly let out a strangled gasp. "Admiral, I'm reading something. It's coming from inside the Kreth formation. There's something there that wasn't there a second ago." The tactical display flickered, and a new contact appeared. It was small, barely visible among the massive Kreth warships, but it was there. A single ship, painted in matte black, moving toward the Silence of Worlds with impossible speed. "All ships," the Phantom's voice said, calm and steady, "I need you to hold your positions for exactly 90 seconds. Don't retreat, don't advance, just hold. Can you do that for me?" Admiral Okonkwo stared at the tactical display, watching the tiny black ship weave through the Kreth formation like a needle through cloth. Ships that tried to intercept it were destroyed with single shots from weapons that shouldn't have been able to do that much damage. Missiles that were launched at it seemed to lose their targets, spiraling off into empty space. It moved with a grace and precision that defied everything she knew about combat flying. 90 seconds, she said into the command channel. "All ships, hold your positions for 90 seconds. The Phantom reached the Silence of Worlds just as the God-Killer weapon finished charging. The massive Kreth flagship dwarfed the tiny black ship, but size didn't seem to matter. The echoes of tomorrow dove straight toward the heart of the enemy vessel, its weapons blazing, carving a path through hull plating and armor and shield generators. Then, impossibly, it was inside. Admiral Okonkwo watched her display in disbelief as the Phantom ship appeared to phase directly through the Silence of Worlds' outer hull, vanishing into the interior of the massive vessel. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Kreth fleet continued to press their attack. The God-Killer weapon completed its charging cycle. Then, the Silence of Worlds began to die. Explosions rippled through the massive ship, each one precisely targeted to cause maximum damage. Power cores ruptured. Weapons systems went offline. Entire sections of the hull blew out into space, venting atmosphere and crew and debris. The God-Killer weapon, fully charged and ready to fire, detonated inside its own housing, the energy release tearing the flagship apart from the inside. The Echoes of Tomorrow emerged from the other side of the dying ship, trailing fire but still flying, still fighting. "The flagship is destroyed," the Phantom announced. "The God-Killer is gone. Admiral, you have a fleet to command. I suggest you use this opportunity to counterattack." Admiral Okonkwo found herself laughing. It was the laugh of someone who had accepted death and been given life instead, the laugh of someone who had just witnessed the impossible and was still trying to process it. "All ships," she said, "full offensive. Target the enemy command vessels. Hit them while they're confused." The human fleet surged forward with renewed determination. The loss of their flagship had thrown the Kreth into disarray, their command structure fractured and their morale shattered. Ships that had been pressing the attack moments before now found themselves under assault from enemies they had considered already defeated. And, through it all, the Phantom fought. She moved from one engagement to the next, appearing wherever the battle was hardest, wherever human ships were in danger of being overwhelmed. She didn't just destroy enemy vessels. She inspired. Every time her black ship appeared, human crews fought harder, pushed further, held longer than they should have been able to hold. The battle lasted another 8 hours. By the time it was over, the Kreth Armada was a scattered ruin. Over 1,500 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were in full retreat, fleeing back to their own space with the ragged survivors of what had been intended to be humanity's extinction. The human fleet had paid a terrible price. 162 ships had been lost, along with over 40,000 brave men and women. But Earth still stood. Humanity still lived. The war would go on. Admiral Okonkwo tried to contact the Phantom after the battle, but there was no response. The Echoes of Tomorrow had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but debris and legends and the grateful tears of soldiers who had been saved from certain death. That night, as the surviving ships limped back toward Earth for repair and resupply, stories spread through the fleet. Stories of a black ship that appeared from nowhere. Stories of a woman who could destroy armies. Stories of hope in the darkest hour. The Phantom had been a rumor before Kepler 442. After it, she became something more. She became a symbol. A reminder that no matter how bad things got, someone was out there fighting for them. In the months that followed, the tide of the war began to turn. The Kreth had lost too many ships at Kepler 442, and they couldn't replace them fast enough to maintain their advance. Human forces pushed back, reclaiming lost territory, liberating conquered colonies, driving the enemy further and further from Sol. And the Phantom kept fighting. She appeared at the siege of Barnard Star, breaking a 6-month blockade that had been starving 1 billion colonists. She appeared at the liberation of Tau Ceti, destroying the orbital defense platforms that had kept the Kreth occupation force safe from counterattack. She appeared at dozens of smaller engagements, saving convoys and rescue missions and patrol ships that had stumbled into ambushes. But something was changing. The technicians who maintained her ship noticed it first. The Echoes of Tomorrow was taking more damage, returning from missions with more battle scars. Repairs that should have been simple were becoming complicated. Systems that had never failed before were starting to show signs of strain. And the Phantom herself, she was different. Slower to smile. Quicker to fatigue. She spent more time alone, sitting in her cockpit and staring at nothing, like she was listening to voices no one else could hear. Maya, the young technician who had befriended her all those months ago, found her one night in the hangar bay, running her hand along the scarred hull of her ship like she was saying goodbye to an old friend. "Something's wrong," Maya said. It wasn't a question. The Phantom didn't turn around. "The ship is dying," she said quietly. "It wasn't designed for this much combat. The systems are breaking down faster than I can repair them. Another few months, maybe less, and it won't be able to fly anymore." Maya's heart sank. "Can't we build another one? The engineers have been studying your ship for years. Surely they've learned something." "They've learned a lot," the Phantom agreed. "But What makes this ship special isn't something that can be replicated. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It's complicated. She finally turned to face Maya, and the young technician was shocked by what she saw. The Phantom looked exhausted, worn down in a way that went beyond simple tiredness. There were lines on her face that hadn't been there before, and her eyes held a sadness that seemed bottomless. I've been fighting for a long time, Maya. Longer than you know. Longer than anyone knows. And I've made a difference. I know I have. The battles I've won, the lives I've saved, the future I've helped protect, it means something. It has to mean something. She looked back at her ship, her hands still resting on its battered hull. But I'm tired. I'm so tired. And I'm starting to wonder if I've done enough. If I've earned the right to rest. Maya didn't know what to say. She had never seen the Phantom like this, never seen the invincible warrior allow herself to be vulnerable. But she knew that something was coming. Something the Phantom had been dreading for a long time. What's going to happen? Maya asked. The Phantom smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of knowledge and loss and 1,000 years of memories. There's one more battle, she said. One more fight that I have to win. After that. She shrugged. After that, we'll see. The final offensive came 3 months later. The Kreth had retreated to their home system, a place humans called the Crucible because of the intense radiation that poured from its dying star. For months, human intelligence had been gathering information about Kreth defenses, fleet movements, and infrastructure. The picture that emerged was grim but hopeful. The Kreth were beaten, but they weren't broken. They still had enough ships to mount a credible defense of their homeworld. More importantly, they were building something in orbit around their primary planet. A new weapon, even more powerful than the Godkiller. If they completed it, they could threaten Earth itself, turning the tide of the war once again. The decision was made to strike before the weapon could be finished. Every ship that could be spared from defensive duties was gathered into a single massive fleet. Over 500 vessels, the largest armada humanity had ever assembled, prepared to jump into the heart of enemy territory and end the war once and for all. Admiral Okonkwo was given command of the invasion force. She accepted the responsibility with a mixture of pride and dread, knowing that she was being asked to lead her people into the jaws of death itself. The night before the fleet departed, she received an unexpected visitor. "May I come in?" the Phantom asked, standing in the doorway of Okonkwo's quarters aboard the Resolution. The Admiral was surprised. In all the time since Kepler 442, she had never met the Phantom face to face. The mysterious pilot had always kept her distance, appearing only in combat and vanishing before anyone could speak with her directly. "Of course," Okonkwo said. "Please, sit down." The Phantom took a seat across from the Admiral's desk. Up close, she looked younger than Okonkwo had expected, but her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, fought too hard, and lost too many friends along the way. "I wanted to talk to you before the battle," the Phantom said. "There are things you need to know. Things I should have told someone a long time ago." Okonkwo leaned forward. "I'm listening." The Phantom was silent for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. Then, she began to speak. "I'm not from this time," she said. "I know that sounds impossible, but it's the truth. I came from the future, from a time when the war was already over. When I was born, the Kreth had been defeated for generations. They were a footnote in history books, a cautionary tale about the dangers of alien aggression." Okonkwo felt her understanding of the universe shift beneath her feet. "Time travel," she whispered. "That's impossible. The physics don't allow it." "The physics you know don't allow it," the Phantom corrected. "But, in the future I came from, we discovered things. Made breakthroughs. Learned how to bend the rules in ways that your scientists haven't imagined yet. My ship, the Echoes of Tomorrow, it's not just a warship. It's a time machine. It was built to travel backward through history, to observe and record and learn from the past. But You didn't just observe, Okonkwo said slowly. You fought. You changed things. Yes. The Phantom's voice was heavy with the weight of her confession. I wasn't supposed to. The mission I was sent on, the original mission, was strictly observation only. We were supposed to watch the war, document it, and return home with a complete record of how it happened. But, when I got here, when I saw what was happening. She trailed off, her hands clenching into fists. I couldn't just watch. I couldn't stand by while people died, knowing that I had the power to save them. So I broke every rule I had sworn to uphold. I used my ship, my knowledge, my training, to fight back. To save lives. To change history. Did you? Okonkwo asked. Change history, I mean. Is the future you came from still there? The Phantom shook her head slowly. I don't know. The mathematics are too complex to be certain. Every time I change something, every life I save that was supposed to be lost, it creates ripples. Those ripples spread through time, altering events in ways I can't predict or control. The future I came from, it might not exist anymore. It might have been erased by my own actions. Or it might have changed into something completely different. I won't know until I try to go back. And, can you go back? No. The word was barely a whisper. The ship is too damaged. The systems that allowed time travel were destroyed months ago. Even if I wanted to return to my own time, I couldn't. I'm stuck here. This is my home now, for however long I have left. Admiral Okonkwo processed this information with the same calm, analytical mind that had made her one of humanity's greatest military commanders. The Phantom's story explains so much. Her impossible knowledge of enemy tactics. Her ability to predict the future. Her mysterious appearance and her refusal to explain her origins. Why are you telling me this now? Okonkwo asked. The Phantom looked at her with those ancient, tired eyes. Because the battle tomorrow is going to be worse than you expect. The Kreth are more prepared than your intelligence suggests. They have reserves you don't know about, defenses you haven't accounted for. The fleet is going to take heavy losses. How heavy? Heavy enough to make Kepler 442 look like a skirmish. Okonkwo felt her stomach clench. Can we win? Yes. The Phantom's voice was certain. But, only if you're willing to trust me completely. Only if you're willing to follow my lead, even when my orders seem insane. Can you do that, Admiral? Can you put your faith in a ghost? Admiral Okonkwo thought about her crew, her fleet, the billions of people back home who were counting on her to end this war. She thought about everything the Phantom had done, all the lives she had saved, all the battles she had won. I trust you, she said finally. Whatever happens tomorrow, I trust you. The Phantom smiled, and, for a moment, she looked almost at peace. Thank you, Admiral. That's all I needed to hear. She stood up to leave, but Okonkwo stopped her with a question. You said you came from the future. In that future, in the history books, did they know about you? Did they remember what you did? The Phantom paused at the door. In the history I came from, there was a legend. A story that parents told their children, about a mysterious hero who appeared during the darkest days of the war. No one knew her name. No one knew where she came from. All they knew was that she fought for humanity when no one else could. They called her the Phantom, and they said she was the reason the human race survived. She looked back over her shoulder, and there were tears in her eyes. I never believed the legend was real. I thought it was just a story, a myth to inspire children. And then, I found myself living it. Fighting it. Becoming it. She opened the door and stepped through. Tomorrow, Admiral, we finish what I started. We end this war. And then, we'll see what kind of future we've created together. The door closed behind her, and Admiral Okonkwo was left alone with her thoughts and her fears and a strange, unexpected hope burning in her heart. Tomorrow, they would face the end. And, somehow, she knew they would survive it. The jump into the Crucible system was the longest of Admiral Okonkwo's life. 512 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons charged and their crews ready for battle. The dying red star at the heart of the system cast everything in a bloody light, and the radiation alarms began screaming before they had even finished their transition. "All ships, report status," Okonkwo commanded. The replies came in quickly. Everyone had made it through. No ships lost in transit, no critical system failures. It was a small mercy, but she would take it. Sensor sweep complete, Lieutenant Commander Hayashi reported from his station. "I'm reading. Admiral, this isn't right. There are too many ships." Okonkwo looked at the tactical display and felt her heart sink. The intelligence had estimated the Kreth defensive force at approximately 300 vessels. What she was seeing was closer to 800, with more signatures appearing as the sensors adjusted to the system's intense radiation. "The Phantom warned me," she murmured, too quietly for her crew to hear. "She said they were more prepared than we expected." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a familiar voice crackled over the command channel. "Admiral Okonkwo, this is Phantom. I'm reading your sensor data. Don't be alarmed by the numbers. Most of those ships are automated decoys, designed to make their fleet look larger than it is. Focus on the ones near the orbital station. Those are the real threats." Okonkwo zoomed in on the indicated sector. Around the Kreth homeworld hung a massive structure, still under construction but already bristling with weapons and shield generators. The new weapon they had been warned about. And, surrounding it were perhaps 200 genuine warships, the true strength of the Kreth defensive force. "That's still twice our number," Okonkwo said. "I know," the Phantom replied. "But you have something they don't have. You have me." On the tactical display, a single new contact appeared. The Echoes of Tomorrow, emerging from some hidden position on the far side of the system, moving toward the enemy fleet with the same terrible grace that had defined its every battle. "All ships," the Phantom announced, "follow the Admiral's commands. She will direct the fleet. I will deal with the station. When I give the signal, concentrate all fire on the targets I designate." "And what exactly will the signal be?" Okonkwo asked. "You'll know it when you see it." The Phantom ship accelerated toward the enemy formation, and the battle began. What followed was unlike any engagement humanity had ever fought. The Kreth threw everything they had at the invading fleet, waves of attack ships and missile barrages and beam weapons that could slice a cruiser in half. Okonkwo directed her forces with skill and precision, breaking the enemy formation into smaller groups and destroying them piece by piece. But, even as her fleet fought, her eyes kept drifting to the black ship at the heart of the enemy defenses. The Phantom was everywhere and nowhere, a shadow that killed without warning and vanished before retaliation could find her. Kreth ships that tried to intercept her were destroyed with single shots. Missiles that locked onto her seemed to lose their guidance, spiraling away into empty space. She moved through the enemy fleet like death itself, and everywhere she went, Kreth ships died. But she wasn't untouchable. Okonkwo saw it happen in slow motion, the moment that changed everything. A Kreth battlecruiser managed to predict the Phantom's trajectory, firing not where she was but where she was going to be. The shot connected with the black ship's engines, sending it spinning off course, trailing fire and debris. "Phantom!" Okonkwo shouted into her calm report. There was a long pause. Then, the Phantom's voice came back, strained but determined. "I'm hit. Hull breach in the engine section. I'm losing power. But I'm not done yet." The black ship stabilized, its course straightening despite the damage. It was slower now, less agile, but it was still flying. Still fighting. "Admiral," the Phantom said, "I'm going to need to ask you to trust me one more time. What I'm about to do is going to look like suicide." "It isn't. But it's going to be close." "What are you planning?" "The station. The weapon they're building. It's almost complete. Another few hours and they'll be able to fire it. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. Okonkwo looked at the orbital station, at its massive bulk and its bristling defenses and the swarm of Kreth ships protecting it. Even at full strength, the Echoes of Tomorrow would have had trouble penetrating those defenses. Damaged as it was now. You can't, she said. It's suicide. Not suicide, the Phantom replied. Sacrifice. There's a difference. When I say now, I need you to have every ship in your fleet target the station's power core. I'll create an opening. You just need to take the shot. And, what about you? How do you plan to survive? Another long pause. When the Phantom spoke again, her voice was soft. Admiral, do you remember what I told you last night? About the history books? About the legend? I remember. In every version of the legend, in every story I heard as a child, there's one detail that never changes. The Phantom doesn't survive the final battle. She flies into the heart of the enemy and destroys them, but she never comes back. I always wondered if that part was true. I guess now I'm going to find out. Okonkwo felt tears burning in her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've run the calculations 1,000 times. This is the only path to victory. And, Admiral, it's okay. I've been fighting for so long. I've carried this weight for so many years. I think I've earned the right to rest. The black ship began to accelerate toward the station, its damaged engines flaring with one final burst of power. Wait, Okonkwo said desperately. Just wait. Tell me your name. Your real name. Someone should know. Someone should remember. The Phantom was quiet for a moment. Then, she laughed, a soft, sad sound. My name is Sarah. That's all I've ever been. Just Sarah. No family name, no titles, no history. I was an orphan, born on a ship that was destroyed before I was old enough to remember it. Raised by strangers who loved me anyway. Trained to fight by mentors who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. The black ship was nearly at the station now. Kreth defenses were firing at it from every angle, but it kept coming, kept pushing forward despite the damage. I don't know where I came from originally. I don't know who my parents were or what happened to them. All I know is that I was given a chance to make a difference, and I took it. Everything else is just details. Sarah, Okonkwo whispered. The name of a ghost. The name of a woman who fought for what she believed in, the Phantom corrected. The name of someone who refused to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. The name of a hero. The Echoes of Tomorrow reached the orbital station and began to phase through its outer hull, just as it had done to the Silence of Worlds at Kepler 442. But this time was different. This time, the ship wasn't coming back. Now, Admiral, the Phantom said. Give the order. Now. Okonkwo found her voice. All ships, concentrate fire on the station. Target the power core. Fire everything you have. 500 human warships opened fire at once. A storm of missiles and beam weapons and mass driver rounds converged on the orbital station, punching through the gaps that the Phantom's attack had created in its defenses. Deep inside the station, the Echoes of Tomorrow detonated its remaining weapons, including its power core, the time drive that had brought Sarah across the centuries, and every last piece of ordnance it carried. The explosion was small compared to the size of the station, but it was precisely placed, designed to weaken structural supports and overload critical systems. The combined fire of the human fleet did the rest. The station's power core ruptured in a cascade reaction that consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers. The new weapon, still incomplete, was destroyed before it could ever fire a shot. The Kreth warships that had been defending it were caught in the expanding blast wave, dozens of them reduced to atoms in the space of seconds. And the Echoes of Tomorrow, along with its pilot, was gone. Admiral Okonkwo watched the fireball expand on her view screen, watched the debris scatter across the void, and felt something break inside her. The Phantom was dead. The woman who had saved humanity so many times, who had appeared out of nowhere in their darkest hours and given them hope when hope seemed impossible, was gone. But there was no time to mourn. The battle was still raging. The Kreth fleet was in disarray after the destruction of their station, but they were still fighting, still dangerous. All ships, Okonkwo said, her voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm her, press the attack. For the Phantom. For Sarah. For everyone she saved. Let's finish what she started. The human fleet surged forward with renewed determination. What followed was not a battle but a rout. The Kreth, their leadership shattered and their ultimate weapon destroyed, fought with the desperation of a dying species. But they were no match for an enemy that had been given a reason to believe. By the time the sun set on the Kreth homeworld, the war was effectively over. The surviving Kreth ships surrendered or fled. The ground forces on the planet below, cut off from reinforcement and support, laid down their arms within days. The war that had threatened to destroy humanity had ended with a human victory, bought at the cost of thousands of lives and one woman who had refused to stop fighting. Admiral Okonkwo returned to Earth as a hero. She was promoted, decorated, and asked to speak at 100 ceremonies celebrating the end of the war. At every one, she told the story of the Phantom. She made sure the galaxy knew who had really won the final battle. But no one ever learned Sarah's last name, because she had never had one. No one ever found her body, because there was nothing left to find. No one ever discovered where she had come from or how she had known the things she knew. In the years that followed, the legend grew. Children born after the war learned about the Phantom in school. They read about her battles, studied her tactics, and dreamed of being as brave and selfless as she had been. Her call sign became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, someone was willing to fight for what was right. The United Earth Navy created an elite unit in her honor. They called themselves the Phantoms, pilots and soldiers who had proven themselves worthy of bearing her name. To join the Phantoms was the highest honor a warrior could achieve, and those who earned it swore to uphold the same values she had embodied: courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. Maya, the young technician who had once comforted the Phantom in a hangar bay, grew up to become one of the foremost engineers in human history. She spent her life trying to understand the technology that had powered the echoes of tomorrow, and, while she never fully succeeded, her research laid the groundwork for advances that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations. She also wrote a book about her experiences with the Phantom. It wasn't a military history or a technical analysis. It was a personal account, a portrait of a woman who had carried the weight of the future on her shoulders and had somehow found the strength to keep going. The book was called The Ghost Who Saved Us, and it became one of the most widely read works in human literature. But time passed, as time always does. Generations were born and died. The Kreth War became ancient history, as distant to later generations as the wars of Earth's early civilizations were to the people who fought against the Kreth. And, slowly, the Phantom began to fade from memory. Not entirely, of course. Her name was still known. Her deeds were still recorded in the archives. But the living memory of her, the visceral understanding of what she had meant to the people who had fought alongside her, that was lost. She became a character in old stories, a face in faded photographs, a legend that might or might not have been based on a real person. Some historians even questioned whether she had existed at all. They pointed to the lack of documentation about her origins, the impossibility of her recorded feats, the way her story seemed to follow the pattern of ancient mythological heroes. Surely, they argued, the Phantom was simply a symbol, a fictional creation that had been invented to inspire soldiers during a desperate war. But, here and there, in odd corners of the galaxy, the truth survived. In a dusty archive on Mars, a researcher stumbled across Maya's original journals, including passages about conversations with the Phantom that had never been published. On a remote colony world, an elderly veteran told his grandchildren about the time he had served aboard the Stalwart, and how a mysterious black ship had saved them from certain death. Deep in the computer systems of the United Earth Navy, buried under layers of classified information, Admiral Okonkwo's original report about the Phantom's true nature was preserved, waiting for someone to find it. And, somewhere out in the vast darkness between galaxies, floating in the wreckage of the battle that had ended the war, a single piece of debris bore the faded image of a black ship with no markings except two words painted on its hull: Echoes Tomorrow. The truth was there, for those who cared to look. But, it was the legend that endured. In the 31st century, humanity spread across 1,000 worlds. They built empires and federations and alliances that spanned the stars. They faced new enemies and new challenges, fought new wars and made new peace. And, whenever things got dark, whenever hope seemed lost and the future seemed bleak, someone would tell the story of the Phantom. A woman who came from nowhere and gave everything. A soldier who fought battles she couldn't win because she believed they were worth fighting. A ghost who refused to stop protecting the people she loved, even after death. Her identity was lost to history. No one knew her real name, her face, her origins, or her final resting place. She had no grave, no monument, no lasting memorial except the stories that were told about her. But, her call sign lived on. Phantom, soldiers whispered before going into battle. Watch over us. Phantom, parents told their children when they were afraid of the dark. She's out there somewhere. She'll protect you. Phantom, academics wrote in their papers and philosophers discussed in their debates. The Eternal Guardian. The Nameless Hero. The woman who saved humanity and asked for nothing in return. Centuries passed. Millennia. The human race evolved and changed, spreading to new galaxies, encountering new species, building civilizations that would have been unrecognizable to the people of Sarah's time. But, through all of it, the legend persisted. Because in the end, it didn't matter that no one knew who she really was. It didn't matter that her identity had been lost to time. What mattered was what she represented. The idea that one person, fighting for what they believed in, could make a difference. The belief that no sacrifice was too great if it meant protecting the innocent. The hope that somewhere out in the vast darkness of the universe, someone was watching over humanity. That was the Phantom's true legacy. Not her battles, not her victories, not even her final sacrifice. But, the way she made people feel. The strength she gave them. The belief that they could be heroes too. And, on 1,000 worlds, across 1,000,000 years, that legacy endured. This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming. They were the last words she had ever spoken, transmitted in the final seconds before her ship entered the enemy station. The transmission had been recorded, preserved, and played back countless times over the centuries that followed. The voice was calm, steady, full of the same quiet confidence that had defined her throughout her career. There was no fear in it. No regret. Just a simple promise, made to everyone who would ever hear it. Help is coming. It became a prayer. A mantra. A battle cry that echoed across the ages. When the Third Stellar Confederation faced extinction at the hands of the Void Swarm, the admiral leading the defense played the recording before the final battle. His forces, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a ferocity that turned certain defeat into impossible victory. When the colony ship Hopeful Dream was lost in uncharted space, its passengers slowly starving to death, a young girl found the recording in the ship's entertainment archives. She played it over the intercom, and the dying colonists found the strength to hold on just long enough to be rescued. When the machine uprising threatened to end organic life in the Andromeda Galaxy, a coalition of species from 100 different worlds rallied under a single banner, a black ship against a field of stars. They called themselves the Phantoms, and they won. The call sign lived on in battlefields worldwide. Worldwide. Across galaxies. Throughout all of time. Because some legends are bigger than the people who inspire them. Some stories are too important to be contained by mere facts. And some heroes become something more than human, something eternal, something that can never truly die. Sarah had been just a woman. An orphan with no name. A soldier with no past. A time traveler trapped far from home, fighting a war she had only read about in history books. But, the Phantom was something else entirely. The Phantom was humanity's guardian angel. The ghost that appeared in their darkest hours. The voice that promised salvation when all seemed lost. The Phantom was hope itself. And hope never dies. In the final days of the universe, when the last stars were burning out and entropy was claiming everything, a small ship carrying the last survivors of a civilization that had once called itself human made its way through the dying cosmos. There was nowhere left to go. No habitable worlds, no friendly ports, no future waiting on the other side of the darkness. They were the last of their kind, a handful of souls carrying the collective memory of a species that had once spread across the entire universe. The ship's captain, a woman whose ancestors had lived on a world called Earth so long ago that even legends had forgotten it, sat alone in her quarters and wondered if any of it had been worth it. All those years of struggle. All those sacrifices. All those people who had given everything so that humanity could survive just a little longer. And now it was ending. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. The slow, quiet death of a universe that had simply run out of time. She was about to give the order to shut down the ship's power core, to let the end come quickly rather than dragging it out, when she heard something. A transmission, impossibly, cutting through the static of a dying universe. A voice, calm and steady, full of the same quiet confidence that had defined its owner across countless millennia. This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming. The captain stared at her console, certain she was hallucinating. It wasn't possible. The transmission was ancient, a recording that had been playing on loop for billions of years. There was no one out there. There was no help coming. And yet she believed it. Because that was the power of the Phantom. Not the battles she had won or the enemies she had defeated. But the way she made people feel. The strength she gave them. The belief that no matter how dark things got, there was always someone fighting for them. The captain didn't know if help was really coming. She didn't know if anything could save them now. But she knew she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not while there was still breath in her lungs and hope in her heart. All hands, she said into the ship's intercom, cancel the shutdown. We're going to keep moving. There's something out there. I don't know what, but there's something. And we're going to find it. Deep in the dying heart of the universe, a black ship moved through the darkness. It was old, impossibly old, held together by technology that defied physics and the sheer force of will of its pilot. And, in its cockpit, a woman who had been many things across many lifetimes smiled. Hold on, she whispered. I'm coming. Because some stories never end. And some heroes never stop fighting. In a small museum on New Earth, rebuilt after the original had been lost to time, there is a display dedicated to the Kreth War. It contains artifacts and documents, weapons and uniforms, everything that historians have been able to piece together about that ancient conflict. But the most popular exhibit isn't any of those things. It's a simple audio recording, playing on loop in a small alcove at the back of the gallery. A voice. A woman's voice. Calm and steady. This is Phantom. Hold your position. Help is coming. Visitors stand before the exhibit, some in silence, some with tears in their eyes. They come from 1,000 different worlds, speak 1,000 different languages, belong to 1,000 different species. But they all understand the words. They all feel their power. Because that's what heroes do. They give us something to believe in. They remind us that no matter how bad things get, no matter how dark the night becomes, morning is always coming. Help is always coming. And, somewhere out in the vast darkness between stars, watching over us with eyes that have seen the birth and death of universes, the Phantom is still fighting. She always will be. That is her legacy. That is her gift to us. Not her name, which was lost to history. Not her face, which no one can remember. Not her story, which has been told so many times that no one knows what's true anymore. Just her call sign. Just 3 words. Just a promise. Phantom. Help is coming. Forever.